The camera slowly pans over a quiet suburban street in the heart of the United States. The houses look like neat lawns, carefully trimmed bushes, and a sense of calm that hides the stories behind closed doors. Inside one of these homes, years ago, a storm had been brewing. It wasn't the kind of storm you could hear howling outside, but one that silently emptied bank accounts, created friction between husband and wife, and left children wondering why their home was full of things but void of peace. Felice was a mother like many others, so busy, determined, and wanting the best for her family. She believed that providing meant filling their lives with new clothes, toys, electronics, and endless shopping trips. Every time she felt stressed or inadequate, she turned to the stores, the online cards, and the discount aisles that promised temporary happiness. At first, it felt harmless, a sale here, a special purchase there. But over time, the habit grew, the credit cards started to stack up, the statements became harder to read, and the quiet anxiety at night became louder. Her husband, Phil, tried to keep up. He worked long hours, often sacrificing his own needs to make sure the bills were paid, but the spending never slowed. Month after month, their savings slipped away. What was once a comfortable life started to crumble. They stopped talking about their future, stopped planning vacations, and started arguing about every little receipt that came through the door. Felice's children noticed the tension. Birthdays became less joyful because the gifts were wrapped in guilt. School trips were sometimes cancelled because there simply wasn't enough left after the bills. There were moments when the fridge was full of leftovers from restaurants but the medical bills went unpaid. The family looked fine from the outside, but inside they were falling apart. It wasn't just about money. It was about control, about emotions that were never managed, about trying to fill a void with material things. Felice would later admit that shopping made her feel alive, in control, and momentarily happy, but the happiness was short-lived. As soon as the bags were unpacked, the shame crept in. How would she explain this one to Phil? Which bill would be late this time? How many times could she say, "I'll cut back," and not follow through? The breaking point came one winter evening. The heat bill was overdue, the mortgage payment was late, and the credit cards were maxed out. Phil sat at the kitchen table with a stack of bills, his hands running through his hair, his face pale with worry. Felice stood nearby, arms crossed, defensive yet defeated. "We can't keep living like this," he said finally, his voice heavy. "We're drowning, Felice. We're not just broke here, we're broken." That sentence echoed in her mind for weeks. It was the first time she truly saw the damage, not just in numbers, but in the lines on her husband's face, the sadness in her children's eyes, the way the house felt cold even when the heater was on. When Felice appeared on the Oprah Winfrey show, she was not just another guest, she was a warning. A reflection of a silent epidemic of families spending more than they earn, trying to keep up appearances, trying to buy love, trying to numb their pain with shopping bags. On the show, she opened up about her compulsive shopping and how it had drained the family's resources. The nation watched as a mother confessed her addiction, not to substances, but to spending. In that moment, Felice faced judgment from millions but also received something rare: understanding. Oprah asked the hard questions. What are you really trying to buy? What are you running from? Felice didn't have all the answers then, but she knew she wanted to change. The road after the show wasn't easy. Therapy was suggested, financial counseling was recommended, and promises were made. But habits built over years don't dissolve overnight. There were setbacks, arguments, tears, and nights spent staring at the ceiling wondering if change was even possible. Phil tried to stay, to make the marriage work, but the cracks were too deep. The trust, once broken, was hard to rebuild. Eventually, they divorced, not out of hatred, but exhaustion. The children stayed with their mother most of the time, learning slowly that love wasn't measured by the number of bags coming through the door. Years passed, and Felice began to rebuild not just her finances, but her life. She remarried a kind man named Darren, who understood her past and accepted it without resentment. Together they had an infant, a new beginning wrapped in a blanket of hope. Felice had fewer credit cards now. She attended support groups. She learned to pause before purchasing, to breathe before clicking buy now, to ask herself, do I need this, or am I trying to fix something inside me? Her story became a lesson, A reminder that sometimes the things we buy come at a cost much higher than the price tag. They cost relationships, peace of mind, nights of sleep, and the quiet dignity of living within one's means. Felice now speaks to other women about her journey. She doesn't glamorize it as she talks about the shame, the lost years, the heavy debt, and the process of forgiving herself. She tells them that recovery isn't about never shopping again, it's about shopping with awareness, about making choices instead of falling into habits. In one of her talks, she holds up a simple baby blanket. This, she says, cost me less than a latte. But the warmth I feel when I wrap my child in it, there's no price on that. Real value isn't what you scan at a checkout. It's what stays with you when the receipt is long gone. The camera cuts to her sitting in a modest living room, no longer filled with unopened boxes or expensive furniture. There's a couch, a coffee table, a few family photos, and laughter echoing from the kitchen. It's not perfect, but it's real. The winter after their appearance on national television brought with it a sense of exposure. Felice couldn't walk through the grocery store without wondering if someone recognized her. Sometimes, she caught the lingering glances of strangers who whispered, "That's the woman who shopped her family broke." At first, the recognition stung. Shame wrapped around her like the cold air outside, pressing against her chest, making each errand feel like a walk of judgment. Phil, though quieter than before, still carried the weight of their financial mess on his shoulders. He had always been the practical Onia, the man who saved receipts, compared prices, and believed in rainy day funds. Now, the rainy day had turned into a storm, and the umbrella was in tatters. One evening, as the children worked on their homework at the dining table, Felice approached Phil with a stack of papers. "I signed up for counseling," she said softly. Phil looked up, skeptical but tired. "Financial counseling?" "Both," she admitted. "Financial and personal therapy." A broken bar. "I think I need to understand why I keep doing this. It's not just about money. It's about what's missing." Phil nodded slowly. "I've been saying that for years, Felice, but hearing you say it's a start." That night, they talked not as enemies or partners in battle, but as two people who had weathered too many storms together. They spoke of the mortgage, the children's needs, the mounting interest rates, and the quiet fear that one more month like this would push them over the edge. The next few months became a test. Felice started attending weekly sessions. She carried a small notebook in her purse, writing down every purchase, no matter how small. Coffee, $2.75. Pair of shoes for the kids, $18.50. She began to see the numbers not as enemies, but as mirrors. Every line on that page reflected a choice, some necessary, some emotional, some reckless. The children, too young to grasp the full scope, noticed the changes in subtle ways. "Mom, we didn't go shopping this weekend," her daughter said one Saturday afternoon. "No, sweetheart," Felice replied with a smile. "We went to the park instead." "But you love shopping." "I used to love it too much," Felice admitted, tying her daughter's scarf tighter against the chilly wind. "I'm learning to love other things now." Still, not everything healed so easily. Phil struggled with trust. Even when the numbers started to stabilize, the damage to their marriage had left cracks. There were nights when he stayed late at work, not because he had to, but because being home felt like walking across thin ice. Eventually, the decision neither of them wanted to say out loud became unavoidable. One spring evening, after the kids had gone to bed, they sat at the kitchen table again. The same table where the bills once piled up now held only 2 mugs of lukewarm tea. "Phil," Felice began, her voice steady but quiet, "I think we've reached the end." Phil didn't argue. He didn't shout. He only nodded, eyes downcast. "I think so too." The divorce was not bitter, it was mournful. Papers were signed with heavy hearts. The children cried, but slowly adjusted. Phil moved into a small apartment nearby to stay close to them, and Felice began a new chapter alone. For the first time in years, she started working not in retail, ironically, but in a small community center that helped women manage their finances. At first, she felt like a fraud. Who was she to give advice? But as the months turned into a year, she found strength in her scars. The very thing that once brought her shame became her story, her warning, her way of saying, "You're not alone." One summer afternoon, after giving a talk at a local library, a man approached her. Darren was gentle in manner, with the calm eyes of someone who listened more than he spoke. He had heard her story, not just in the headlines, but in the way she told it, raw, unpolished, real. They began to meet for coffee. Coffee turned into dinners, dinners into walks, and walks into something Felice had forgotten she could feel: safety. Darren didn't care about the headlines or the old debts. He cared about the woman sitting across from him, trying every day to be better than she was before. By the time Oprah's Where Are They Now team returned to check in on her, Felice was remarried, with a small baby boy nestled in her arms. The house they filmed in this time was smaller, simpler, warmer. The walls were lined not with designer furniture, but with finger paintings and family photos. Felice smiled more easily now, her voice softer, her laughter genuine. In one poignant moment during the filming, she looked into the camera and said, "I used to think being a good mom meant buying everything my kids wanted. Now I know it means being present, being honest, and sometimes saying number." Darren placed a gentle hand on her shoulder as the baby gurgled in the background. "We don't have much," she added, "but we have enough, and enough is a gift." The crew packed up their lights and cameras, leaving behind a story of redemption that would inspire many. Felice wasn't perfect, as she still caught herself lingering by store windows, still felt the old urge to buy her way out of a bad deal, but now she had tools, a pause, a breath, a choice. Her older daughter, now a teenager, once asked her, "Mom, if you could go back, would you do it differently?" Felice paused, thinking of all the sleepless nights, the debt, the lost marriage, the lessons learned. "Yes," she said honestly, "but then I wouldn't be who I am now, and I like who I am becoming."